Aaja represents one of the 2 Danish Parliament seats held by Greenland, an autonomous country that's part of Denmark. I spoke with Aaja at the Arctic Circle Conference in Greenland's capital, Nuuk.
We heard the Prime Minister addressing the crowd here and talking about that we all share the same air and the same ocean and land. He also said in Glasgow that he's from Greenland, but his island is melting. There's a sense of urgency here, and I want to start there because you've lived here your entire life. You know Greenland from years ago to today. I don't think you need to be a scientist to say, oh, there's climate change. I mean, if you live here and you see the glaciers melting, so talk to me about what that's been like to live here and to actually witness it with your own eyes, because so many parts of the world, it's still, oh, is it a thing?
I actually think a lot of people in the Arctic, they're quite used to adapting. So I don't think this is necessarily something that we've seen, or this is something that's changed rapidly, because there's always changes in the Arctic. But for example, coming to North Greenland and seeing Uummannaq, which is an island, a city where there's an island, and seeing that it takes maybe a couple of months extra for the ice to come, which means that the city and the dog sled, for example, won't be able to go out into the ice. That's really changing the lives of people living here in Greenland. And we're used to adapting to changes and living in a harsh environment. But so we also see the opportunities. We see, for example, new fish species in Greenlandic waters. We see new opportunities when it comes to access to minerals around the earth in the Arctic. But we also see the challenges, and it's very concerning when you see, for example, natural fires in the summertime in Greenland. And last year, I think it was coming closer and closer to Sisimiut, which is the second biggest city in Greenland. So of course, this is affecting people in many, many ways. But I would say overall, we're used to adapting to a new reality.
Aaja is a member of Inuit Ataqatigiit, Greenland's democratic socialist political party. Prior to going into politics, she worked on social issues, including children's and indigenous rights. As a native Greenlander, she's witnessed how her country has become increasingly important in global affairs.
How does Greenland navigate the geopolitics? I have a friend in Iceland who said it's extraordinarily difficult trying to deal with all these relationships. There's lots of pressures coming from so many different directions. You're nodding your head, so I don't think that this comes as a surprise to you. How does Greenland deal with that?
Trump, former President Trump wanted to buy Greenland, and it really, put a lot of focus on Greenland. The website of Visit Greenland crashed, actually, because so many people was trying to access it. And it was quite interesting to see. And I was giving 400 interviews in a couple of weeks, actually. So it was crazy for me also to see how much opportunity there actually is in this, focus on Greenland and the Arctic. And things have changed, and we've seen the consulate here in Nuuk. We've seen EU is going to open an office here. So it creates a lot of opportunities for Greenland, and I also see that in the Arctic.
After Trump said that, comedian Conan O'Brien came here. I mean, you know all of this. I mean, all of a sudden Greenland's on the map. A lot of people laughed about it, but was it beneficial in a way for Greenland? I mean, in terms of raising its profile?
I think a lot of people back here in Greenland, they were, thinking it was quite disrespectful the way he did it, because he was just saying this is just a real estate buy I would like to do, and I would like to buy a country. But I think in retrospective, I think a lot of people can see it really gained the Greenlandic society, because there's new opportunities and there's closer collaboration, for example, with the United States and also with Canada right now. So I feel in many ways that we're writing history as we're living in it. And this is quite exciting, because I would like to see a power shift from the south to the north, because so many of the decisions are being made in the capitals, usually of a majority who doesn't know that much about the north. And therefore we need to have a strong representation, and we need to make sure that Greenlanders are sitting at the table and sitting at the right tables and having the power to flip decisions. So we make sure that Greenlanders and people of the North are being heard.
And Biden just announced that there's going to be an Arctic ambassador. What are your thoughts on that?
So exciting. I think we need ambassadors, and I think focusing on, especially on the Arctic. But I think it would be good to have someone from the Arctic being an Arctic ambassador. Capacity building when it comes to foreign affairs is so important for people living in the North. And making sure that, we get well-educated young people, for example, out in the world and get them back again is something that's going to make sure that the decisions that we can make when it comes to foreign affairs in the future will be even better. It will be more qualified. And I was actually working at United Nations on indigenous peoples issues at the Secretariat through the Foreign Affairs Ministry in Denmark. And gaining that knowledge and also seeing Greenland in a different global perspective was quite interesting for me. So I think we need to, create more of these opportunities, and especially for people coming here, and not just people from the South, being an ambassador and first getting the knowledge and then working. But actually it would be better to have Arctic ambassadors from the Arctic, because then you could just start working all at once.
How would you describe the relationship between Greenland and China? There's been a lot of talk about that, and in fact, I've heard a lot of discussions about it here during this forum, and it just started today. So I want to get your thoughts on that.
We don't necessarily see China as something that's super visible when you walk on the street, for example. We have around 100 people in Greenland, living in Greenland from China. They're usually working at the plants, the fishery plants for Royal Greenland, because they don't have the capacity in the local community. So, of course, that would be even better. But I don't necessarily see China as being as visible as they used to be just 5 or 10 years ago. So I see the...
And why do you think that is?
I think it's a presence from US, first of all, to be honest. I think it's maybe also for Greenland looking in a different direction, looking into cooperation with Canada, with US, and that way around, which I think makes so much sense when you look at the language, when you look at culture, when we look at the history and what we have, of shared experiences as well. So I usually say that Greenland is a part of the Arctic, but we're also a part of the Nordic. And we need to take the best from both worlds in order to make sure that we're creating the society that we would like to have here.
Is it an either or? Can you continue to maintain a relationship with China and the US and Canada, or do you have to choose?
I think we need to be much more proactive when it comes to foreign affairs. And I think usually it's been, countries from the outside showing an interest. And therefore it's been, maybe a collaboration between China and Greenland on different specific issues, or maybe US or EU. And I think it would be much more interesting to have a much more proactive role for Greenland, to take the front seat when it comes to the development of our foreign affairs in the future. And we're still in that process, and we're still in the process of figuring out what kind of an Arctic strategy or foreign affairs strategy should we have that is much more clear, and that is something that we're, in the front seat of.
But even as new economic opportunities arise, Greenland's population, made up of 90% indigenous Inuit, still faces social challenges. For example, education levels remain the lowest in Greenland of any Nordic state, with more than half the adult population with no more than a 10th grade education.
This forum here, obviously it's not just people from Greenland, it's from all over the Arctic and all over the world. What's your hope when the forum wraps up and people get on planes and leave here? What's your hope?
First of all, I hope they had a good stay in Nuuk, in Greenland. I'm always proud to show our city and also our country to people coming from the outside. And I think for people living here in Greenland, because I think that's important as well, I think it's become more and more visible how much focus there is on the Arctic and on Greenland, and in a positive way. And we really need that in order to, empower the population in Greenland, but also to be much more global and see that global issues are actually something that's affecting us and the other way around. So I think that's important for the people living in Greenland. And for people traveling away from Greenland, I hope that they will see that so much is happening in Greenland. You can see cranes all over the city. You can see so much development in Nuuk. And I know a lot of us in Greenland would like to see that expand to different cities around Greenland as well. Housing is also an issue for us in Greenland. We still have some social issues that we need to address. But there's so much that's going in the right direction. And we're seeing, hopefully in the years to come, that there will be more business development in Greenland.
So as someone who grew up here, one of the things that's kind of runs through you is the fabric of that close-knit society and everyone kind of in it together. When you open up Greenland, a lot more tourists could come in here. A lot of the dynamic that you love about Nuuk, Greenland, could change. Do you worry about that?
I don't necessarily see, for example, mass tourism in Greenland, but I think it's good for Greenland to have global businesses, for example, the extractive industry, fisheries, and tourism, and welcome people from the outside to Greenland. And of course, it's different from when I was growing up, but I think it's quite universal that we all want our children to have a better life than what we had, and more opportunities for education, for example, for activities. I used to be a spokesperson for children here in Greenland, appointed by the government. And when I was traveling around speaking to children, they were saying, we would like to have, a swimming hall the way that we have it here in Nuuk. We would like to have that at different places. We would like to have a cafe. We would like to have a sports hall, for example, for different activities and so on. So I think there's, we need to have different opportunities, both when we talk about education, in order to make sure that also children in small settlements, that they will be able to get their education in the place that they were growing up instead of going to a bigger city. We need to have investments, we need to have growth in order to be able to make sure that the welfare of the people living here is going to be even better in the future.
Aaja says a big part of protecting the Greenlandic culture is promoting the Greenlandic language. In the 1950s, when Greenland became a Danish country, the Danish language became prioritized in schools, government, and business. Today, the tension between these languages still exists.
When I was growing up, every time we finished, for example, primary school, secondary school, or university, we were told the future is yours, it's up to you, and you have an obligation to help build this society and this nation. And I think for a lot of people in my generation, we really feel this obligation in a good way, and we really feel that we need to push things forward. So therefore, I'm quite impatient when it comes to making sure that there will be better opportunities. And at the same time, I see the development going so fast, and making sure that we still hold on to the culture, to the language. It's been a problem for me as well. So when I was growing up, I was speaking only Greenlandic, and both my parents are speaking Greenlandic and have a close connection to the country still. But it was very popular at the time in the 80s in Nuuk to speak Danish. So Danish is actually my first language. I understand everything in Greenlandic, but I can't speak it as fluently as I can speak Danish. So even though around 90% of the people living in Greenland speak Greenlandic, language is something that brings you closer to your culture. So I would like to see that more young people coming from here have a more not as complicated relationship to language, thinking of Greenlandic first, Danish, and then English. It will create a lot of opportunities for young people.
Let me ask one final question before you go. When you talk to the youth throughout the world, they recognize climate change as an existential threat. They worry about their future, their children's future. Will we even have grandchildren, some of them say. Do they have enough of a voice? Does Greenland have enough of a voice on the global stage? And what needs to change there?
I think first and foremost, it's about taking responsibility locally as well. And I would like to see that the Paris Agreement is something that we're actively saying we would like to be a part of this and the work globally in order to make sure that climate change is something that we're doing what we can in order to prevent that more will happen. And this is a process that's going on because Greenland hasn't signed the Paris Agreement. And this is due to the wish to have business development. But I think in the future we will see that Greenland will sign the Paris Agreement and Greenland will take more initiatives because this is something that the government is pushing for. So I think not only for young people, because we also have older people living here in Greenland who are very interested in making sure that we are much more involved on climate issues. I'm sure that there will be a push not only from society but also politically to make sure that we are doing even more. Because the temperature in the Arctic is rising 4 times as much as the rest of the world. And of course this is affecting us. And what's happening in Greenland is affecting the rest of the world and the other way around. So, we need to be engaged in global issues and especially the climate change.
Thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.